Howdy, I'm Darren Hibbs with the 10-Week Bible, and I wanted to share a quick thought with you out of the book of Genesis in chapter 44 and 45. If you remember the story of Joseph, it was his brothers that sold him into slavery in Egypt, where he went to Potiphar's house as a slave, and then he got thrown into prison. But then the Lord elevated him in charge of all of Egypt, made him the most powerful man in the world. But it was one brother's voice in particular that stood out to Joseph, and that was his brother Judah. His brother Judah wanted to kill him that day in the field. When he came to check up on his brothers, Judah said to his brothers, "Let's kill him." And it was Reuben that stood up for him and said, "No, don't kill him." And they threw him in this cistern while Reuben tried to figure out some way to spare his life. But it was Judah that wanted to kill him. And then it was Judah that said, "Let's sell him as a slave." And later we find out in Genesis that they're talking in front of Joseph, the brothers, before they know that it's Joseph they're talking to. They didn't know he could speak Hebrew. And they're telling each other, we're in this trouble right now. This man here, Joseph, is making this trouble for us because God saw what we did when we sold Joseph into slavery. Remember how he pleaded with us. Think of Joseph's anguish as he's pleading with the brothers, "Don't sell me into slavery. Don't do this. Why are you doing this?" He's a young man. And his older brothers in their 20s and 30s, they sold him out of jealousy. He's pleading. And the last memory he has of his brothers are of them callously, angrily getting rid of him. And I think Judah's voice stuck out above all of the rest of them. Let's turn to Genesis chapter 44 and see the last encounter that Joseph has with his brothers before he reveals himself to them and lets them know who he is. This is starting in verse 33 in chapter 44. Judah is talking to Joseph because Joseph wants them to leave Benjamin. Joseph has been kind of like messing with them. He's had this plan in place to keep them there. And I think the plan all along was to bring Jacob, his father, to Egypt and then reveal himself. I don't know that because the scripture doesn't tell us, so we don't know what Joseph's plan was. But my guess is that's what he was trying to do. He was stringing them along without revealing himself long enough to get Jacob to come to Egypt so that he could reveal himself to Jacob and all of his brothers. But Judah did something that I think ended Joseph's plans, ended all of this kind of cloak and dagger stuff that he was doing, pretending that he was someone else, not telling them he was Joseph. He had kind of set Benjamin up so that Benjamin would be required to stay in Egypt. And I think that was to force Jacob to come get Benjamin. And then Judah says this, starting in verse 33. "Now then, please yet your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in the place of the boy," meaning Benjamin, "and then let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see this misery that would come on my father." This was Judah saying, "Don't take Benjamin. Don't keep him here as a slave. It will kill my father. Take me in the place of Benjamin." I think when Joseph heard those words coming out of the brother that he remembered the greatest, it's the one who wanted to kill him and callously sell him into slavery. When he heard Judah say that, this is what happened, starting in chapter 45, verse 1. "Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, 'Have everyone leave my presence.' So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about him. Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph.' When he heard Judah's words, 'Take me instead of Benjamin,' I think whatever plans Joseph had, that he was stringing his brothers along for months. They were going back and forth to Canaan. He was stringing them along the whole time, never told him who he was. Judah's words ended that. Have you been in a place where you've wounded people and you've hurt them and you know there's a separation there? You know that there's a broken relationship. It can be mended. It can be fixed. It's not always in your power. But Judah's words broke Joseph. He couldn't keep going. He was so overwhelmed with emotions when he saw the change in Judah. Let the Lord change you like he did Judah. We know a lot of negative stuff about Judah, but I believe the Lord changed him. I believe he softened his heart to the Lord. And I believe here Joseph sees that and he can't keep going anymore. And he breaks out weeping. He throws his arms around his brother and says, I'm Joseph. It's me. He can't keep doing this plan to get his family there. He broke down and he had to tell them. The Lord can mend relationships. Broken relationships that you have. He can do it. They're not always easy. This was a painful and emotional time for them all, I'm sure. But the Lord brought joy. And he can do the same in your life. If you will throw yourself into the Lord and let him refine you and purify you, just like he did Judah. He can mend those relationships if you throw yourself into him. Thanks for watching. I'm Darren Hibbs with the 10-Week Bible. I'll see you next time.